Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Greetings to the people on the Outreach Ministry. Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, v'ahavto et Yahweh Elohecha, b'kol lavaveka, uv'kol nafasheka, uv'kol ma'odeka. First thing I want to do is I want to look at a couple of scriptures from the New Testament that I think we have probably taken in a wrong way, at least many people have, who come from a Christian background. Matthew 18 and verse 20. Matthew chapter 18 and verse 20. I'll turn there so that I can time about how long it takes you all to get there. Matthew 18 and verse 20. For Yeshua said, and these are the words of Yeshua, for where two or three are gathered together in my name, there I am in their midst. And a lot of people have applied this to judgment. And I think, Christianity does. Say, we don't need any leadership because all we need is two or three gathered together in his name, and there he is. And so we'll automatically come to the right conclusions, right? That's the way a lot of Christians think. Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7, back up a few pages. We've read this many times, and we've talked about it. Do not judge, lest you be judged. Verse 1, Matthew chapter 7 and verse 1. Do not judge, lest you be judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with the same measure you use, it shall be measured to you. And so, we've gone over that, and a lot of people look at that and say, well, look at that. See, you can't judge anybody because, with what judgment you judge, you're going to be judged. So you just don't judge anybody. So if you see somebody kill somebody, I guess that means Christians shouldn't be witnesses, right? If you take it that way. If you know somebody's committing adultery, well, just turn your head. That's between them and Yahweh. So that's what a lot of people think. That's how they reason. That's what they get out of this. And in John chapter 7 and verse 24, John chapter 7 and verse 24, John 7, 24, Yeshua said, do not judge according to appearance. Well, just because it looks like adultery, or just because it looks like murder, don't judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. So we look at these scriptures, and even Romans, let's take one more. Romans chapter 14, Shaul, because here's a statement of Shaul, and we have studied in our studies the last several months, we found that Shaul really did not come up with new stuff. He preached everything in accordance and in agreement with what Yeshua preached. Romans 14 and verse 10. Romans 14 and 10, where Paul says, but why do you judge your brother? Why do you despise your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Messiah. So if you see somebody commit murder, if you see somebody steal, if you see somebody commit adultery today, well, just let it go because Yeshua will judge it in the end. Right? I mean, isn't that what Paul is saying? And so we lift, or we tend to, many people do, lift these statements that are made by Yeshua and Shaul, they lift them out of their context, and they do not put them back in the context of the scriptures, which is Torah. So today I want to talk to you about judgment today. Are these statements telling us that judgment is different? I mean, what was ancient Israel supposed to do with a murderer? Stone him. What was ancient Israel supposed to do with an adulterer? Both parties were to be stoned. Exactly. So, we find those things in the Torah, don't we? But is judgment today different? And how is it different? And why is it different? Should we put these statements that are made about judgment by Yeshua and by Shaul in the context of the Torah and the judgment, the mitzpat, mitzpatim, of Torah. And you know, when it says that we are to live by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yahweh, we have Torah, we have mitzvot, which are good deeds, and we have mitzvah, and we have kuka, which are statutes. But mitzvim are the judgments. What are the judgments of Yahweh? Are the judgments that we just read in Matthew 18, Matthew 7, John 7, and Romans 14, out of the context, are they the standard? Are they to tell us what judgment is like? Did Yeshua really change the Torah? Or do we believe what he said, don't think that I came to change the Torah? And is mitzvah, or mishpatim, is mishpat and mishpatim, are they part of Torah? So did Yeshua not change Torah except mishpat and mishpatim? Or are these statements taken out of context, and do they warp our concept of judgment and put judgment in our hands, aside from what Torah says? Okay, well, let's look at some things. You know, some people do get the idea from those that everyone in the congregation has the Ruach, and there is no need for leadership or for leadership in judgment. Right? That's what we can gain from those scriptures. Sometimes this attitude interferes with proper Torah practice. Now, last week I said I was giving a message that probably wouldn't help you keep the Torah. I'm telling you, this message will help you keep the Torah. If you really want to keep the Torah. You know, there are a lot of us that want to, you know, come and have a feel-good service and think that we're rubbing up with the Ruach, and we might get together with one or two other people and think, well, where two or three are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst. And so two or three make mishpat or mishpatim. But are they based on judgment, or are they based on their little chit-chat and how good they feel about it? Is that what it's based on? And if that's what it's based on, then we're back to the position everyone did what's right in his own eyes. Now, I'll give you some examples as we go along. So some feel bolstered by these statements of Yeshua and Shaul. Let's look at the system of judgment that was instituted in the Torah. In Exodus chapter 18, Exodus 18 and verse 24. And this is where I was going to give I was going to give Karen a math quiz, but she's out of the room, so I can't do that. All right, real quick, what's 1,000 times 1,000? 1 million. I heard some people had it right. That's right, 1 million. All right, but we're going to look at 1,000, and you can multiply this by 1, 2, or 3. In Yahweh's Torah, the structure, if you had 1 million, is going to look a little different than what we read in Exodus 18:24, because it's going to be multiplied. Notice in Exodus 18:24. Remember, this is where Moses was making all of the judgments. Right? They were bringing all of the questions to Moses. And for the most part, Moses had answers. Once in a while, he didn't have an answer. And we're going to see what he did there. Well, Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law, because his father-in-law Jethro came and said, hey, this is going to wear you out. And the people are going to have to wait a long time, aren't they? Say if they just had 1 million people and only 10% of them had some question that they had to bring for judgment. Think how many people would be standing in line waiting to get to Moses. Right? Okay, so Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men, because this is what Jethro suggested to him, out of all Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands. Now, if you have notes, you have a pyramid on the top of the next page, on the top of page 2, that'll show you what 1,000 looks like. He made rulers of thousands and then under them rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And really, what these rulers were judges. They were set up to be judges. They rightly ruled every matter, every small matter themselves. And Moses sent off his father-in-law, and he went away to his own land. And all the big stuff, Jethro said, okay, the big stuff and the hard stuff, let him bring it to you. But all this little petty stuff that goes on between people, let them take it to somebody down below somewhere. So now, here's what it would look like. 1,000 judges. If you had 1,000,000 people, there would be 1,000 judges of 1,000. Every 1,000. If you had 1,000,000, just 1,000,000, you'd have 1,000 of those 1,000,000 people would be judges over 1,000. 1,000 thousands is 1,000,000. And every one of those judges, every one of those 1,000 judges would have 10 judges under him over 100. Okay? And every one of those 10 judges that are going to have 100 people under them would have 2 judges of 50. It seems like we're going in the opposite direction, doesn't it? It looks like my pyramid ought to be upside down. But wait a minute, just a minute. I'll show you how this works out. And then each one of those judges of 50 would have 5 judges of 10. Oh, we just went up again. If you have 1,000,000 people, we just said there would be 1,000 of those people would be judges of 1,000. How many of the total population, if there were 1,000,000, would be judges of 100? Anybody do that quick math? Not just 10, which is each one, 10 judges under each 1,000, that would be over 100. There would be 10,000. So you go from one judge of 1,000, and if you have 1,000,000 people, you have 1,000 of those, and every one of those has 10 who are judging 100, that's 10,000 judges of 100. 10,000. So 1,000 judges of 1,000, 10,000 judges of 100, and every 100, every judge of 100 would have how many? Only 2 that would judge 50, but how many total would that be? 20,000. 20,000 of the population would be judges of 50. And then, of those 50, there would be 10, there would be 5, who would be over 10. Anybody got that math figured out? 100,000. This is just if there's 1,000,000 people. 100,000 judges of 10 people. Now, if there were 2,000,000, all these figures would be double. And if there were 3,000,000, which is what we estimate came out of Egypt, it'd be triple. That's a lot of people doing judgment, isn't it? So now when you go to the bottom of the pyramid, and you have those 100,000, 200,000, or 300,000, and they're only judging 10 people, they're going to get the everyday stuff. So out of the 10 people that they're judging, how many are going to have something that's too difficult for one of those judges? Probably not very many. And so those issues will pass up to the next judge, and the next judge, and the next judge, as they are not solved. And finally, The hard things, as we saw in that scripture, will come to Moses. And Moses had all the answers. Oh, I see at least one person shaking their head. No, he didn't. Because if Moses couldn't solve it, where did he go? He went to Yahweh. And later, when we come to the end of Moses' life and he passes everything down to Joshua, everything would come to Joshua, but if Joshua didn't know the answer, who did Joshua go to? Nope, Joshua did not go to Yahweh. Who did he go to, Brian? The high priest. And then the high priest would go to Yahweh, right? How did the high priest go to Yahweh?
Once a year.
No, he could go often with the Urim and the Thummim. Remember, he had the Urim and the Thummim, and that's in Numbers 27:21. He goes to Eliezer, and if Eliezer can't answer it and has to go to Yahweh, he does it through the Urim and the Thummim. Moses was the only one who went directly to Yahweh. When it came down to it, it came down to the high priest with the Urim and the Thummim. So that's what the judgment looked like, in ancient Israel when it started out being a system of judgment. A lot of people. Well, what about in the New Testament? Do you think maybe one scripture we read last night in our study of the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, Ephesians chapter 4, turn there. Ephesians chapter 4. Now, when we started out, I said, really, do we believe that Shaul gave different judgments than Yeshua? I don't. And Yeshua did not give different judgments than the Torah, because he said, don't think I came to destroy the Torah, and judgment is part of the Torah. So let that sink in your heads a little bit and think, well, what was Yeshua talking about? 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name. What was Yeshua talking about when he said, don't judge? Was he doing away with part of Torah? Mishpatim? I don't think any of you believe that, do you? But sometimes you act like it. Just to be plain with you. Sometimes we act like it. We act like he did away with, because we will say, oh, we don't judge. We can't judge. If that's what Yeshua meant, he did away with Mishpatim. And he didn't do that. So we need to put these in the context of this Torah. So when Paul comes down in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 11, and he says, and he himself, and who is he talking about? Oh, Yeshua. The same Yeshua that said, I didn't come to do away with Mishpatim, which is part of Torah. He himself gave some as emissaries, some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as shepherds and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, or of the set-apart ones, or of the Kodashim, to the work of service, to a building up of the body of Messiah, until we all come to the unity of the belief, Shemuna, and the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah, so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, or by every wind of rumor, or by our own doing everything in our own. Judgment is not given to everyone apart from Torah. Let's be plain about that. 2 or 3 gathered together in my name do not have the right to make judgments that are not in accordance with Torah. That is not what Yeshua is saying. so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men and cleverness, unto the craftiness of leading astray. If we are led away from the mishpatim of Torah, are we led astray? If we do not know how to properly administer mishpatim, are we led astray? I'd say we are. But maintaining the truth in love, we grow up in all respects into Him who is the head, Messiah. Did Messiah make mishpatim apart from mishpatim, judgment? Yeah? Mishpatim is judgment. Judgments. It's the plural for the Hebrew judgments. So did Yeshua make judgments that are different than the Torah? Did his judgments, are his judgments based on Torah or not? And if they're not, you don't have a Messiah. Because he lied. And he couldn't die for your sins because he had to die for his own. So what do you want to pick? I believe in a Messiah that didn't sin and that did not kick over any part of Torah which he gave to Israel, including judgments, mishpatim. And so he says that Yeshua gave this. Does this structure that Yeshua is giving here, or that Yeshua gave, that Paul is reiterating here, does this structure have anything to do with the context of judgment? If it doesn't, then how can it bring the perfection of the set-apart ones? If there is no judgment and everybody does what is right in his own eyes, okay? And that's what you have if everybody is making their own judgments apart from Torah, then what do you have? Confusion. Chaos. Anarchy. So this statement that Paul makes here must be put in the context of the mishpatim, the judgment of Torah. This is what this is for. Okay? Until we all, are we perfect men yet? I don't know of any one of you that's perfect. And I'm included. We are not perfect. None of us. So we still have judgments to make. From whom, in verse 6, the entire body is joined and knit together by what every joint supplies according to the working by which every part does share, causes growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. And they will latch onto that word love and say, oh, you just have to love everybody. That's verse 16. Yeah, did I miss a verse? 16. Verse 16. Okay. Everybody there? But we all understand that love can be tough love. And that it is not love to excuse somebody and push them over the cliff into the fire. Rather, it is love to confront them and to pull them out of the fire. That is the love of Messiah. And Christianity doesn't understand that love. They just think it's you just have to love everybody and just turn your back on all their wrong. And some people say that we have a lot of drama here. Well, we have drama because we face violation of Torah. And it's because we love people. It's not vicious. It's because we have a duty, an obligation with the Ruach of Yeshua and Yahweh to help people on the path of salvation. Not to push them over the edge and let them go and do their own thing when they're doing wrong, when they're doing wrong Torah. In 1 Timothy, Paul reiterates this structure, put these scriptures in the context of the judgment system of Torah, folks. Don't think of Paul as coming up with something that did away with the Torah system of the Old Testament, the Torah system of judgment. He didn't. These are all said within that structure. That's why he talks about pulling people away from the fire. Now the question is, are there sins, if we can just use the plain term, are there violations of Torah that are worthy of death that we cannot exercise the death penalty for? And the answer is yes. But we are given alternatives in the New Testament because we are not in control of the God. At the time of Yeshua, who executed Yeshua? The Romans did. If the Romans allowed the Jews to exercise the Torah judgments and the penalties that went along with them, who would have killed Yeshua? The Pharisees, the Jews. But you see, they did not have that prerogative. And we do not have that prerogative today because our government has taken the right, if you will, or the obligation of the death penalty for Torah violations that would be worthy of death away from us. But Paul does give us, Yeshua does give us an alternative, doesn't he? And some of you know what that is. I'll get into it a little bit later. But in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1, put this in the context now of this system of judgment that was given to us in the Torah. Trustworthy is the word. If a man longs for the position of, the Greek word is presbyter. The Hebrew word, if you were reading this in a Hebrew New Testament, it would be a zaken. It means an elder. And, we recognize that there are elders and then there are elders. And we, have kind of flip-flopped and wishy-washed a little bit because of what context we have been given these things in the past. And so we just say that everybody who's maybe past 60 is a zaken. Well, they are in age, but they have not been given the office that he's talking about here of a zaken. To lead people in judgment based on Torah. Now, sometimes we can consult with some of these older people who are zaken in years, and we can get wisdom from them. And we can consult with other people in the congregation to get their feedback and their understanding of Torah. That's the key. We should not be consulting with each other just to find out what's popular. And as long as I'm here, that will never be done. Y'all know that, right? That's why some of you are afraid of me. Because I'm not interested in what's popular. I am not going to take a vote in the congregation and find out what days we should keep. I'm not going to take a vote in the congregation and find out whether an adulterer should be put out of the congregation. I don't need to take a vote on that. But I do have consultation with other elders to make sure that I'm not making a judgment that is contrary to Torah. Not contrary to some Christian idea about what judgment is from the New Testament, completely taken out of context, but what really is the judgment in Torah. And that's what I'm interested in. If you're not interested in that, I'm telling you, you're in the wrong place. Or you're playing. You're just playing with Yahweh, and I'm telling you, it ain't going to come out good. It won't come out good. So trustworthy is the word. If a man longs for the position of a zaken, an elder, he desires a tov work. It is a good work. An overseer, or this elder then, should be blameless, the husband of one wife, sober, sensible, orderly, kind to strangers, able to teach, not given to wine, no brawler, but gentle, not quarrelsome, no lover of money, one who rules his own house well, having his children in subjection with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how shall he look after the assembly of Elohim? So he's talking about somebody who's he's talking about the same thing that he talked about to the congregation at Ephesus. He's talking about a system of judgment. Put it in the context of the Torah system of judgment. And it's not just about sitting around judging people. It's about sitting around judging according to Torah to bring people to perfection, like he says in Ephesians chapter 4. That's what it's talking about. In Matthew chapter 21, Now, even today, y'all have heard of a Sanhedrin, right? Most of you, if you've studied a little bit of Judaism. Sanhedrin, the word does not appear in the scriptures. They think they are basing it on this system of judgment. But the rabbis came up with 3 different kinds of courts. And they did it because they based it on doubt, which we're going to read about in this verse. They didn't quite understand, well, how would this all work? So they decided, well, there's doubt here, so this is a good reason for us to have a hedge around what the Torah says. That's really why they have oral law. Because of questions that people have about written law that the rabbis never were able to send up and get an answer from Yahweh. So they became a law unto themselves. And the Sanhedrin is the highest court that you can go to in rabbinic Judaism. It's made up of 71 people. And by the way, they do have one in Israel now. They do now. And actually, in Judaism across, even in the United States, there are places, there are sections where they have a Sanhedrin. And they make decisions. They might decide to put K or U or D on some food that they were able to put a blessing on. That's the kind of things they do. So, that's what they do have that. They recognize that there was this system, but they've changed it and they've adopted it themselves. And the reason they have is because of this doubt. In Matthew 21 and verse 19, Matthew 21:19, we just went over this a week or so ago in our Wednesday night study. Seeing a fig tree, and by the way, this was like 2 or 3 days before Yeshua was impaled when he was giving this teaching, when he did this. Seeing a single fig tree, by the way, he was going from Bethany into Jerusalem. He came to it, and he found nothing on it but leaves, and he said to it, "Let no fruit grow on you ever again." And immediately the fig tree withered, and the taught ones, seeing it, marveled, saying, "How did the fig tree wither so soon?" And Yeshua answering said to them, "Truly I say to you, if you have shemuna, belief, emuna, and we know that belief is not just a Twitter pating that goes on in your heart, right? It's a dedication of your heart to do the obedience of Torah. If you have belief and do not doubt." And so we look at this and we say, well, when we pray for somebody, we've got to really believe that it's going to happen. Do not doubt. The Hebrew word is safek. and it means to wallow. It means to hesitate. Okay? So you do not hesitate. And that's real, and that's why we have rabbinic Judaism, because people hesitated. But Yeshua said, if you do not hesitate, you do not doubt, you shall not only do what was done to the fig tree, but even if you say this to this mountain, be removed and be thrown into the sea, it shall be done. And whatever you ask in prayer, believing, you shall receive. So they doubt, and so they have oral law. That's the reason for the oral law. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't think it's going to come to pass. That's not the kind of doubt it is. It's a lack of confidence in the power of Yahweh behind you. And how do you get that? Now, when Yeshua said this, there are some folks that think he was talking about the Sanhedrin, who were using oral law because of their doubts on written law. And what he was saying was, there is not going to be any more fruit out of you ever again. And so when he cursed the fig tree, he was actually pronouncing a curse on the Sanhedrin, which was not according to Torah. The Sanhedrin wasn't. It was similar, but not the same. It was not Yahweh's court. It simply was not. Because they weren't judging based on Torah. They were judging based on oral law. So this is another condemnation of oral law from Yeshua. Now let's go back to chapter 16, Matthew chapter 16, and look at some scriptures that people have wondered about, and the Catholic Church uses these to show that their hierarchy has the power to change Torah. I mean, you know, those of you who were Catholic, isn't that what you learned from this? The infallibility of the Pope. Matthew 16:18. Yeshua says, I say to you, this is where he asked Kepha or Peter, who do you say that I am? And he said, well, I believe that you're the Messiah, the son of Elohim. And Yeshua said to him, well, you are Kepha. You are, and Kepha actually it means a small pebble. And upon this rock, not the same word, this is Petra in the Greek, which shows that there's a difference in the word. Peter's a small pebble, or Kepha, but Petra is a massive rock. Yeshua is the rock. Could have had that song up here today. Yeshua is the rock. On this rock, which is himself, I shall build my assembly, and the gates of the grave shall not overcome it. So he's not even talking about Peter. But he does say this, I shall give you the keys of the reign of the heavens. Do you know he's given you the keys of the reign of the heavens? What is it? What are the keys of the reign of the heavens? Nope, it's not eternal life. That's not the key of the reign of the heavens. What is it? Torah. It's the Torah. He's given every one of you the Torah to understand. And he says, whatever you bind on earth shall, having been bound, it's a real odd wording, in the heavens, and whatever you loosen on earth shall be having been loosened in the heavens. So this means that if 2 or 3 of you get together and you decide that Sunday is Saturday, that'll be bound in heaven, right? That's what they say, but that's not what Yeshua is saying. If you're talking about which day is set apart, the Torah already tells you what day is set apart. And you, as long as you are making your decision based on Torah, it's already bound in heaven, isn't it? So what this is saying, I've given you the Torah, that is the seat of judgment. And as long as you are making your decisions based on Torah, they're bound in heaven or loosed in heaven, whichever way it goes. As long as it's based on Torah, the keys to the reign of the heavens. Now, how many people do you know who can take this scripture and put it in the context of the Old Testament judgment? You can now, because that's what it's talking about. In Matthew chapter 18, he repeats this. But notice in what context he puts this. Turn to Matthew 18 and begin in verse 15. You tell me that this passage is not about judgment. Matthew 18:15. If your brother sins against you, go and reprove him. Between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. Now, does that mean if your brother steps on your toe, that you have cause to go to him? Well, you might, but it's not really talking about that. It's talking about a bigger magnitude. It's talking about something that he has done to you that is contrary to Torah. Contrary to love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? Because, you're not going to, if somebody happens to have their foot out and you trip over it, are you going to have to get your brother and say, hey, that guy tripped me? We're talking about some anti-Torah stuff here. All right? If he does not hear, take with him one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word might be established. Is that Torah? That's Torah, folks. So we have here judgments that are going to be made based on the keys to the reign of the heavens. If he refuses to hear them, these 2 witnesses, verse 17, then tell it to the assembly. It doesn't say, you've already called your neighbor and your neighbor is gone. It doesn't say, go make phone calls to everybody in the assembly about it. It says, no, take it to the assembly in meeting. Take it before the assembly. Let him, and he says, if he refuses to hear the assembly in verse 17, then let him be to you like a Gentile and a tax collector. Now, if it was adultery against you with your wife, if you're a man, then what was the penalty? It was death, like you said before. But in the Roman Empire, when the death penalty was taken away from Israel, you couldn't do that. So he says, let him be to you like a tax collector or a Gentile. Now, this reveals to us that we are talking about relationships with individuals. And Torah governs relationships with individuals. When someone committed adultery, or stole, robbed, or broke the Sabbath, what did you do with your relationship with that person? You cut it off, didn't you? Because you killed them. Well, how do you cut it off if you can't kill them? You kick them out of a relationship with you. That's Torah. It's the only thing you can do when you're under Bama law, the Gentile law. And it has something to do with Obama, but not everything. Okay? because there are lots of leaders, as someone pointed out a few weeks ago, that led us into or administered Obama law over us. Every president we've had since, I don't know, maybe before Abraham Lincoln. Okay. So this is what we're talking about. Let him be to you like, and does Paul say anything like that? Yep. If anybody's a drunkard, if anybody is a murderer, an idolater, kick them out. Because you can't kill them in the administration that we're under. But to you, they are like dead. So we have all kinds of people who get these Christian ideas that, well, they can dabble with this relationship and that relationship, when the Torah judgment is already made. If we act like that, we are going contrary to Torah. Lo and behold, truly I say to you, in verse 18, Matthew 18:18, truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall having been bound in heaven, and whatever you loosen on earth shall having been loosed in heaven. If your decision is based on Torah, that's the way it is in heaven. And there are some people, even of Yahweh's ilk, that go contrary to heaven. Because they go contrary to judgments that were made based on Torah. Again, I say to you in verse 19, if two of you agree on earth concerning any matter that they ask, it shall be done for them by my Father in the heavens. For where two or three are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst. And that has to be based on agreement with Torah. Doesn't matter if two of you get together and agree, and if it's contrary to Torah, it's not bound. If you make a decision and you bind yourself to somebody contrary to Torah, you're under condemnation. You're not under some love pact. You're under condemnation because you're against a judgment made in Torah. And that's where all of our decisions need to be made. So this binding and loosing is not some magical power. The authority and decision is based on and from Torah. So if we make a decision based on Torah, it has been bound in heaven because that is where it originates. Because that's where Torah comes to us from. In Ezra chapter 2 and verse 62. Ezra chapter 2 and verse 62. Might have a little trouble finding Ezra here, you might. It is... I didn't put the page number down. Joe, did you? 820. 820? In the old or new? In the new, it's on 820, so it's probably 818 or 19, somewhere in that vicinity, if you want to turn to it. Ezra chapter 2 and verse 62. Israel, actually it was Judah, coming out of Babylon, reestablishing temple worship, if you will. And, of course, as part of temple worship, there were things that were set apart for the priests, that were Kodesh only for the priest or the priesthood. And so there were lots of folks that had been in Babylon for a period of time, and they kind of lost their genealogy. They kind of thought they were of the tribe of Levi, but Ezra said, prove it. Prove it. Because he did not want to be responsible. Now, if two or three, he could have just got together with Nehemiah and said, hey, can we cut these people a little slack? Can we just show them a little Christian mercy here? Right? No, he couldn't. Because he was bound to keep Torah. So he said, prove it. And when they couldn't prove it, this is what they did. These sought their registry among those who were counted by genealogy, but they were not found. So they were barred from the priesthood as defined. And the governor said to them that they should not eat of the most set-apart gifts until there stood up a priest with the Urim and the Thummim. So they had lost the Urim and Thummim, and the governor, who was a believer, said, the only way we can overturn this decision by Ezra is to take it directly to Yahweh through the Urim and the Thummim. You know, and sometimes we could come close to having a position like that, couldn't we? What are we to do today? What kind of judgment should we have today? Does everybody get how important judgment is, and that the New Testament does not change judgment from the Old Testament? So what are we to do today? Well, Ecclesiastes 12:13, which we read at the end of every Feast of Sukkot, pretty much tells us, let us hear. Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the entire matter. Fear Elohim and guard his commands. Now, if we dabble around and we have doubt and we say, well, because I doubt and I doubt whether that is totally correct or not, and besides I have all this Christian love in my heart, and so I'm going to do it my way. Does that ever happen? I'm afraid it does. Then, is that fearing Elohim? I don't think so. I don't think so. And is that guarding his commands? I don't think so. For this applies to all mankind. For Elohim shall bring every work into right ruling, mishpat, including all that is hidden, whether tov or whether raw. Well, which side do you want to be on? Do you want to have him tell you, you made a decision that wasn't based on Torah? How would you like that? How would you like to sit before Yeshua and have him say, in this instance over here, you did not make a judgment based on Torah. You made a judgment based on your little chit-chat with your friend. I'm afraid some people are going to face that. John 16. So what about those decisions that are beyond our understanding of Torah, where we really do need a Urim and a Thummim? Are we cut short of that, or did Yeshua tell us where we go? Where do we go with that? John 16:13. John 16:13. Now, this doesn't mean we go directly to this and bypass and say, oh, the Ruach told me that I don't have to worry about Torah anymore. And some people act like that. This is for the tough stuff, when the Torah is not clear. John 16:13. When Yeshua comes, when he comes, the Ruach of the truth. What is truth? Psalm 119, 142. Yahweh's commands are truth. That's Emunah. Psalm 119, verse 142. All your commandments are Emunah, are truth. So when the Spirit of truth comes, he shall, or it shall guard you into all the truth. Guide you. Guide you into all the truth, for it shall not speak from itself, but whatever it hears, it shall speak, and it shall announce to you what is to come. So, there are things, if we can't see clearly in the Torah, that we have to go to Yahweh, and does that mean he's going to answer us today? Not necessarily. There are lots of things that we say every once in a while, we're going to have to ask the two witnesses. Or we're going to have to ask Yeshua when he comes back. John 17. John 17. Yeshua in his prayer, the night before he died, prayed to Yahweh and said, set them apart in your truth. Make them Kodesh. In your truth. Your word is truth. And you see in that footnote, if you have the notes there, Psalm 119, 142. All the word of Yahweh. That's where you have to seek for your judgments. And, you know, there from time to time there is necessity to rely on someone who studies the Torah more than you. Now, would that be not true? But I think it probably is, and that's why Paul said what he did. And you'd better take a look at the judgments that are made and ask yourself, are they according to Torah? Are they according to Torah? And if they are, and you choose not to go that way, then something about you is not bound in heaven. And that would be a shame. And so come away from the edge of that cliff. Don't dabble with the edge of that cliff. That's what we're trying to keep you from doing. Okay? So judgment today has to be based on our understanding and put in the context of judgment as it was given in the Torah. That's where the keys to the reign of the heavens are. May Yahweh bless you and guard you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and give you his favor. May Yahweh lift up his countenance over you and give you his peace. Yiva rekeka Yahweh vayishmereka. Ya'er Yahweh panav aleka v'kaneka. Yasa Yahweh panav aleka v'yasem l'ka shalom.